And this from Jane of Menchaca, Texas. My name is Jane. I am here as a mother and grandmother and a Planned Parenthood volunteer. I grew up in a small Texas town in the 1950s and early 60s. Birth control pills had not been invented and abortion was illegal. There was no sex education in schools. And just as today, girls did get pregnant. If a family had financial means or connections, they might arrange for their daughter to get a safe abortion in a faraway place. Less fortunate girls might find themselves in the hands of a shady, illegal abortionist and suffer the consequences of injury or death. Many found themselves in sudden marriages at an early age. They found themselves trapped in unhappy marriages or living a hard life as a single mother, shamed in the community, without education, with hard, low-paying jobs. I was right here in this Capitol in March 1972 when women filled the halls to lobby for the Equal Rights Amendment. Even though the federal legislation failed to gain national ratification, I was proud that Texas was among the states that stood up for the rights of women. We have come a long way since then. Birth control and access to safe legal abortion have changed the lives of women, men, and families. I have a friend who faced a very difficult choice a few years ago. She and her husband were expecting a baby that they very much wanted. They were so excited. Then genetic tests revealed that the child was carrying a specific gene that is common to serial killers. Not all persons with this gene become serial killers, but many serial killers share the gene. What a terrible choice to make. Do you bring into the world a person who might someday kill the loved ones of others? Do you trust God to take care of everything? I won't tell you what choice they made. It's no one's business, and that is the point. How can the state of Texas insert itself into such a difficult private dilemma? There has been a lot of dissembling about the purposes of this legislation being to make the health care safer for women. I salute our governor, lieutenant governor, for his honesty yesterday in tweeting the truth that the purpose of this legislation is to end abortion in Texas. It makes me very sad as a sixth-generation Texan to see my home state moving back to the 1950s. I have seen the 1950s, and I don't want to go back there. I ask that you oppose HB 60. Thank you for your time. And this from Carol in Austin, Texas. No one ever thinks they are going to be faced with the decision of terminating a much-wanted pregnancy, of deciding when to shut off the life support of their beloved child. My spouse and I were faced with exactly that decision. On December 1st, 2008, I was thrilled to discover that I was pregnant with my first child. My husband and I had recently married and decided to start having kids right away. 4 months later, we went in for our regularly scheduled ultrasound at 20 weeks, where we were going to find out if we were having a boy or a girl. Finding out your baby's sex is easily the most exciting time of any pregnancy, and we were ecstatic to discover that we were having a girl. Unfortunately, that moment was cut short when the OB-GYN also told us that our baby was sick and referred us to the maternal fetal specialist. 2 days later, we were given the heartbreaking news that our daughter was not only sick, but had a terminal condition, hydrops fetalis, in which abnormal amounts of fluid build up in the body. Given the early onset of my daughter's illness, her condition was very grave, and we left the specialist's office with our choices. We could wait until she passed, induce my labor, or have a dilation and extraction. Knowing that your daughter is dying is heartbreaking. When you are given the news that there is nothing that can be done to save your baby's life, it feels like your soul has been ripped apart. But we had a decision to make. Even if we decided not to do anything, we were still making a decision. and we had a limited amount of time to decide. There were so many things to consider. Did I want to hold my baby? Did I want to name her? Did I want to have her baptized? Where would she be buried? Would I be able to hold her while she died, if she somehow did survive until term? In the meantime, I couldn't eat, I couldn't sleep, and I couldn't leave the house. Every time that I left the house, someone would comment on my pregnancy. They asked perfectly normal questions about my due date, the gender, the name. I answered their questions as nicely as I could, and then I would turn around and burst into tears. So eventually I stopped leaving my house. I couldn't eat because my stomach was in knots from the anxiety. I didn't know exactly what was going to happen, and I didn't know when it would happen. And I definitely couldn't sleep. I was petrified that my baby was going to die while I was asleep. I just knew that I was going to wake up one day and discover that she had died at some point during the night. The idea that I couldn't be with her and know when she had passed was more than I could bear. We decided to have my labor induced. It felt like the best path for our family. We started making burial arrangements. We didn't have a grave plot for her because we never anticipated needing one. Instead of planning a nursery, I was picking out a headstone for my baby. Instead of choosing an outfit for her to wear home, I was picking out her burial gown. It was devastating, but there was some comfort in the fact that we were moving forward. Except we weren't really moving forward. Shortly after making our decision to have my labor induced, we were informed that it wasn't really possible. My husband worked for Seton at the time, so we had Seton insurance. As a faith-based organization, Seton would not allow us to have our labor induced while our daughter still had a heartbeat. That meant that we were either forced to wait until she passed or agree to have her heart stopped. After weeks of being crippled by grief and anxiety, I couldn't imagine waiting any longer. Our obstetrician appealed to the ethics board at Seton on our behalf, but our appeal was denied. So we made the decision to have our daughter's heart stopped. In the meantime, I prayed and begged for a miracle that I knew wasn't coming. Every night, I would talk to my baby, who we named Amber Grace, and I would tell her that I loved her. I would tell her that I loved her and that I was sorry that she was sick. And then I would tell her that it was okay to leave me. At this point, my daughter was going to die, and it was only a matter of time when and where it happened, and if we could avoid having her heart stopped, then that is what we prayed for. But she didn't die on her own. On April 8, 2009, we went to the specialist's office, 5 p.m. We took a final look at our baby on the screen, said our goodbyes, and her heart was stopped less than an hour later. My labor was induced that night, and she was delivered 4 years ago on April 9th. I held her, kissed her, watched her get baptized, told her that I loved her, and I said goodbye. None of our daughter's life and death went as planned or expected. I expected to have her for the rest of my life. And when that wasn't possible, I expected to be able to say goodbye to her in the way that I had chosen, but that wasn't possible either. It is very frustrating to feel like the choices you have made for your baby's life and death are not being respected. Hearing that your baby is going to die makes everything in your life feel like it's out of your control. Being told that you don't really have any control over how your baby is going to die is devastating and self-defeating. I chose to have a baby and to bring her into this world. I should be allowed to make the very personal, very private, and very painful decision as to how she leaves it, guided by the best interest of my child and my family. If a 20-week ban had been in place 4 years ago, then I wouldn't have been able to make this choice. Waiting for your child to pass is certainly a viable option for many who have been in my position, but so is the path that I chose and would choose again. Physically, I faced a small chance of developing complications from continuing to carry her while she was sick. Mentally and emotionally, however, I would have deteriorated, and mental illness can be just as debilitating as physical illness. I would hate to see other families denied the right to choose what is best for them. These decisions are hard enough without placing extra limits on them.